was a sweltering afternoon in Morocco, the air heavy with anticipation, as if nature itself held its breath. My family and I had just finished a late lunch when it began, a seismic tremor that sent shivers through the very bones of our home. Dishes shattered, and the walls quivered as though possessed by some malevolent force. As the chaos unfolded, we rushed out into the courtyard, our hearts pounding in our chests. Our once stable world had become a nightmarish realm of upheaval and destruction. I looked around, fear gripping my every thought. The streets outside were a chaotic tableau of disaster, with buildings crumbling into heaps of debris and terrified cries filling the air. In the wake of the earthquake's initial onslaught, we cautiously ventured back indoors, where the ground still trembled beneath our feet. It was then that we heard it, an otherworldly, mournful wail that seemed to emanate from deep within the earth. My family exchanged uneasy glances, for we knew the old legends that spoke of restless spirits awakened by such events. As the hours dragged on, the aftershocks persisted, each one a cruel reminder that our world had forever changed. Our home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a fragile cocoon, shielding us from the unforgiving chaos beyond. The electricity was out, plunging us into darkness save for the flickering candlelight that barely illuminated our anxious faces. With no news or communication from the outside world, we could only speculate about the extent of the devastation. My heart ached for those trapped beneath the ruins, for the families torn apart, and for the city itself, a wounded and battered soul. As night fell, an oppressive silence enveloped our home, broken only by the occasional aftershock. Sleep was an elusive visitor that night, for my mind was consumed by visions of the earthquake's terrible toll. But it was in the dead of night that the true horror began. A whisper, soft as a breath, touched my ear, chilling me to the core. I lay still, listening, convinced that it was a figment of my fatigued mind. But then it came again, faint yet unmistakable, an eerie, disembodied voice that seemed to call my name from the darkness. Panic surged within me, and I dared not wake my family, fearing I might alarm them with my irrational fears. Instead, I crept through the moonlit corridors, drawn inexorably toward the source of the voice. I found myself standing before a cracked and ancient mirror, its surface marred by age. My reflection stared back at me, distorted and grotesque in the dim light. And there, within the glass, I saw it, a shadowy figure, its eyes pools of darkness, beckoning me with a skeletal hand. My heart raced as I backed away, but the voice continued to call to me, growing more insistent with each passing moment. I felt as though I were being drawn into the mirror, into a realm of terror beyond imagining. With a surge of determination, I turned and fled, tearing myself away from the mirror's malevolent grasp. I returned to my family, vowing never to speak of the haunting encounter. For the rest of that long and terrifying night, I clung to my loved ones, praying that the dawn would bring an end to the nightmare that had befallen us. The earthquake had left more than physical scars. It had unearthed something ancient and malevolent, something that whispered from the shadows and beckoned from the mirrors, a horror that would forever haunt my dreams.
As the earthquake shook the very foundation of the Moroccan hospital, I found myself trapped in a nightmare I could never have imagined. The lights flickered and then plunged into darkness, leaving only the eerie glow of emergency exit signs to navigate by. Patients cried out in fear, their voices a haunting chorus in the pitch-black chaos. I fumbled for my flashlight, its weak beam revealing the destruction around me. Cracked walls, fallen equipment, and the constant tremors threatened to collapse the entire building. Fear knotted in my stomach as I struggled to reach my patients, their moans and pleas cutting through the deafening roar of the disaster. Hours passed, but it felt like an eternity. The aftershocks continued, each one a terrifying reminder that our lives hung by a thread. I did my best to provide comfort and care to those in my charge, but the desperation in their eyes mirrored my own. When the rescue teams finally arrived, it was a bittersweet moment. They pulled survivors from the rubble, their faces etched with exhaustion and relief. I watched as my colleagues and I joined the effort, tears mingling with sweat as we worked tirelessly to save as many lives as possible. Aftermath. As I stood amid the ruins of the hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stepped into a nightmare and was still waiting to wake up. The once familiar corridors were now unrecognizable, a labyrinth of destruction and despair. The memories of that fateful day would forever haunt my dreams, a reminder of the fragility of life in the face of nature's wrath.
I hesitated to share this story, but I believe it's important to document the eerie events that unfolded on that fateful night in Morocco when I became an unwitting rescuer during and after a devastating earthquake. The night had been serene, and the small town of Ouarzazate lay still under a star-studded sky. I was visiting my friend Ahmed, a local shop owner, when the earth suddenly roared to life. The ground beneath us trembled violently, and panic swept through the streets as buildings swayed ominously. In the chaos, my instincts kicked in, and I rushed to help those in need. I pulled Ahmed from the wreckage of his shop, and together we navigated through the rubble-strewn streets. The moonless night seemed darker than ever, and the air was thick with dust and despair. As I searched for survivors, eerie sounds echoed from the damaged buildings. Faint cries for help mixed with unsettling moans. The flickering flames of streetlights cast eerie shadows, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone in the darkness. Hours passed, and the aftershocks continued to torment us. It felt as if the very earth was conspiring against us. I couldn't help but wonder if this was the end, if we were trapped in some malevolent nightmare. Dawn finally broke, revealing a landscape of devastation. The once charming town was now a scene from a horror movie. Broken buildings loomed like sinister sentinels, and the distant mountains appeared as ancient titans awakened from slumber. In the days that followed, I joined the international relief effort, helping to rescue survivors and provide aid to those who had lost everything. But the horror of that night in Morocco haunted my dreams. The eerie sounds, the feeling of being watched in the darkness, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness stayed with me.